Hello, welcome back to Reads of an Apple. My name is Stacy, and I'm here to film our penultimate favorites of 2022 video. If you have not seen any of my others, they are all linked in the playlist up above. But I am going through my 5 main subgenres of romance and filling out my bracket to figure out what is my favorite. Like I said, we are at the second to last episode, so already we have completed contemporary, fantasy, historical, and today is paranormal. So we are almost all the way through. I'm just going in alphabetical order. But yeah, so I will flip to my screen so you can see me go through and fill out my bracket. But first we will talk about how I laid out the bracket, some slight changes that I made for this year compared to last year if you haven't seen the other videos I've made. And then we'll just get into it. So let me flip you around and I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are on my desktop screen here. And let me just kind of pull up a couple of the things that we will be going over. Now, once again, this year I did make all of my brackets in Canva. However, this year I am just filling them out in Canva. Last year I filled them out in Photoshop, but I'm not gonna worry about having multiple programs this year. So trying to make it a little bit simplified. So let me just kind of pull up. Here is the paranormal bracket that I created this year. If you're interested in filling out any of these brackets, I have created them all as templates available in Canva, and they are linked down below in my link tree, and they will be there until I create my 2023 brackets, which I already have my backgrounds for. I just haven't gotten around to actually making them yet, but there's no rush whatsoever because I won't fill them out till January of next year. But so this year is the same as seed number. I went with a seed of 16, and that allows me to pick one favorite of each month and then 4 bonus books in case there's a readathon or I go through a binge of a series or something to kind of cover all of the bases. And then this year I did kind of change up who was against who and just kind of rearranged who was against who in each little section of the bracket. So this year we have January versus October, March versus December, May versus bonus book number 2, July versus bonus book number 4, September versus February, November versus April, bonus book number 1 versus June, and bonus book number 3 versus August. So there is the blank bracket. Now, I have gone through and I have done a couple of things this year to kind of change up how I'm going to do my layout. If you saw last year's and you haven't seen any of this year, last year what I did is as we went through each section of the bracket, the first round, I went through and talked about every single book and made my decision, and it took a very long time. Now I'm trying to keep these hours under these videos under an hour this year, and so far I've been kind of close to that in the 40 minutes range, which is good. But what I have decided to do, instead of going through each book as I fill out the bracket, I have made a little cheat sheet here that I kept track of throughout the year, where once a month was completed, I would put what my winner was in this spot, and then I use this as a template to fill out that first level of the bracket. So what we're going to do this year is we are going to talk about every single book first and then go fill out the bracket. And so far, things have been a lot easier to fill out the bracket when I talk about everything first. And then just for your information, I actually made myself a little cheat sheet. So I am looking at what this is on my iPad. I downloaded the images, and this is the blurb, the basic information of the book, what I rated it, and everything like that. And I have it for all of the books, as well as the few honorable mentions. And this I actually also worked updated after the end of every month. And then before figuring out what my bonus books were, what I actually did is put them all here with a to decide bar. And then once it came to the end of the year and I needed to figure out which books I was choosing from my bonus books, I was able to have them all compiled here and then choose from there on which ones were going to make the bracket. So there's that. You're not going to see that outside of what I just showed you, but I will be looking at that off my iPad. So let us just zoom in here and then we will start talking about the paranormal books I read in 2022. So to start off with January, we have one of my favorite paranormal, and I feel she writes more cozy paranormal, is Molly Harper, and this is Nice Werewolves Don't Bite Vampires, and this is the 8th book in Half Moon Hollow. I had no idea this came out. I am a big fan of the Half Moon Hollow series, which actually spun off of her Jane Jameson series, and I was very excited to find that there were more books in this series, but it had been a while since I read the previous book, so I didn't quite remember everything. But this is Tylene and Alexandra, and he has come to Half Moon Hollow because he is friends with a couple of the previous heroes in the series. And then Tylene is the cousin to a werewolf shifter that marries Jane's best friend pretty early on in the series, and I want to say she's in the original Jameson books as well as a side character. But I give this 4 stars. I mean, it was almost very formulaic, but not in a bad way, of what I come to expect from Molly Harper books, especially in this Half Moon Hollow series. And it was just really fun to kind of go back and read some new stories in this series, and it was just fun. I mean, it was great to kind of see check back in with some old friends kind of a feeling, and I just really enjoyed it. And I don't really have much else to say about it, but if you haven't read Molly Harper and you're looking for a more cozier paranormal, I definitely check out her Jane Jameson series as well as the Half Moon Hollow series. Although I definitely recommend to read Jane Jameson first, just because then you kind of understand some of the bigger backstory. And Jane Jameson has, I think it's 4 books of focusing on Jane and her romance, and then we spin off and she's a side character in the Half Moon Hollow books, but she's not the main character anymore. But yeah, then February, and this one kind of breaches between paranormal and fantasy, but for Pharaoh Feb, one of the new authors for Pharaoh Feb was November Dawn, and I picked up Warrior's Regret, which is the first book in her Demon Hybrid Warriors series, and this, from what I could tell, is her debut, and she's only released 1 other book since then, and it was in a different series, so I'm hoping that there's more books in this series. But this is a rejected mate situation between Aster and Cole, but it's a different kind of rejected mate. So what happens is, in this series, there are demons, and then I think there are half demons or hybrid demons. And to find your mate, there is like think DNA testing that you can submit to, and you give your information to this matchmaking company, and they run your statistics or run your data or whatever they take from you. And when you have a match, and they keep it on file, so if they have not filled out or if they have not applied to this, then at some point you will get your mate's information if they don't do it right away. But Astrid is very excited to find out that she has a match. Cole, however, is one of the big trainers in the I guess, demon military force, and his good friend had kind of tricked him into submitting his information to this, but he thought he was submitting his information to something else, not this matchmaking thing. So when his friend kind of drags him to this building to have a meeting, he then finds out the truth, and he didn't want to find his mate yet. There's a lot that he's kind of focusing on in his job and in keeping the demon world and the demon population safe and secure, and there's some kind of rumblings of bigger bads coming into play. And so he doesn't have the culpability right now to worry and take care of a mate. So he doesn't look at her, he doesn't get her information or anything like that, and he's just like, you forced me to take this without my knowledge. And he goes back to his training facility. Well, he keeps the basic information sheet that he gets on Aster, and after a little bit he just can't help himself and he looks at her information, and then he kind of keeps tabs on her like through social media and things like that. And then when he finds out what her like capabilities and her job is, he recommends her for a position at his base, kind of a more researchy office position, and she ends up taking the job and coming to live and work at this base that's kind of out in the desert area. And then he kind of finds himself drawn to her, and he takes it upon himself to teach her self-defense, and he eats dinner with her at the cantina and things like that. And she feels horrible because she knows she has a mate out there, and if her mate ever wants to meet her, that they are perfect for each other. But she's starting to have feelings for Cole, and he takes a while to tell her what is really between them. But I mean, as a debut, I thought it was great, and I feel like I liked the different take on the rejection, because it was a lot easier for me to handle him rejecting her with the fact that he didn't know what she looked like, he didn't know who she was or anything like that. He just didn't want a mate, and he was kind of tricked into finding his mate by his friends. So I felt like I liked the twist, and it wasn't too angsty for me on the whole rejecting your fated mate kind of situation. It took a little longer than I would like for her to find out the truth, but I just really enjoyed it. I gave it 4.5 stars, and I'm excited to read whatever else November Dawn decides to write, and I'm hoping there's more in this series. And then we moved to March, which apparently I went through a rejected mate phase because I just had to give it to the Tiger Alpha's Rejected Mate by Kate C. Wells. This is the first book in the 5-pack series, and Una and Killian are just magic. This is, I mean, I gave it 5 stars. This is Rejected Mate Gold, and there's a lot of different situations kind of going on here. And even though, I mean, we're talking like rejection and stuff happening from when they're children to now, and it's really, really good. It's honestly one of my favorite books by Kate C. Wells, and I've enjoyed a couple of the other books I've read from her. But this was just like, it was just so good. And I haven't read any more in the series yet. I know there's a couple more books that have come out, but I just loved it, and I loved the little friend group that she had. And even though she was physically disabled, she was such a strong person, both in will and her sense of self. But she was able to be strong. And when she was broken after that rejection, my heart sunk for Una. And I mean, Killian had his work cut out for him to turn it around, and I feel like he did a good, appropriate amount of groveling, and I just really enjoyed this. 5 stars. So, hey, now now we come to April. As you can see, I have a little thing on here that says bonus. I actually did not read this in April. I didn't read any paranormal books in April. So this one, I had at least had enough bonus books that I could cover, or extra books that I could slot into some of the empty spaces. You will see when I do my sci-fi one, there are just some spots that are blank because I just did not read enough sci-fi to fill out full 16 seeds. So, but anyway, I read this, I believe I read this in November or late October, and I picked up No Rest for the Wicked by Cressley Cole. I finally got back to Immortals After Dark. This is the second book in the series, and this is Catherine and Sebastian, and I gave it 5 stars. I mean, tell me why I haven't picked up this book sooner after reading the previous 2 books, the prequel and book number 1. I enjoy this series immensely. I know that I will love this series, but for some reason I'm just taking it really slow to get through it. And maybe that's because I know I can see myself binging the rest of this series and just not reading anything else. And for how many book clubs and other reading commitments I have put for myself, that's just not something that I can do anymore by my choice. But I mean, I love this. I didn't quite know what to expect. I have listened to Fated Mates way back when they first did it, so I don't really remember much of the series, but this one kind of brings in the supernatural amazing race plotline, and it was so much fun, and I wanted more from it because I used to watch Amazing Race with my mom, and it's a super fun and great show. And so I did wish that we got to see more of that. But I just love the romance between Catherine and Sebastian, and dealing with, I mean, she's Catherine the cold, and Sebastian is just like ready to waste away into nothing, and then he meets her and he's like, oh, she's my fated one, and she's my reason for living, and I will do anything and everything to be with her and make her comfortable to be with me. And I loved it. It was just everything I could want from a Cressley Cole book. And I know that there are favorites in the series by a lot of people that I haven't even gotten to. So yeah, I definitely need to read more from Cressley Cole and in this series in general. So, moving on to May, we have another bonus book. I read this in November for the Love and the Night readathon, and this is Darkest Night by Alessa Thorne. This is her paranormal series, Mercenaries and Magic. This is the first book in that series. This is Athena and Con, and this series, I love all of the books I've read from Alessa Thorne, but this series is just so cozy to me, and it hits on, like, we got a little bit of darkness and like revenge and murdery, and we get those like good action sequences. Then we've got dirty talkers and some really nice steam in here, and then we get this like fun Lorecraft, Tomb Raider, and National Treasure kind of vibes, where they're trying to find antiquities and they're dealing with cults, and I love, and they're a mercenary group, but they're also dealing with antiquities. And I love that Athena and Con are constantly like finding themselves going after the same antiquities, but what Con comes to realize fairly early on in the series is that Athena isn't buying them for a different buyer than Con, but she's stealing these antiquities back and returning them to whatever the rightful owner or rightful place that they belong. And so she's like doing it for free, basically. And I don't know. I love this series. I am super excited. The fourth and probably final book, unless she does another spin-off series off of this one, comes out in March. And the third book came out in January, and I need to read the third book. I have since read the second book, and Alessa Thorne has a lot of different options for you to pick up on if you like fantasy and paranormal romance. But like I said, there's just something so cozy and perfect about this series that it just makes me feel so happy inside when I read these books. And it's just, specifically this series, it's just amazing, and I love it to pieces. Okay, so moving on to June. So June saw the release of Always Practice Safe Hex by Julia Cross. This is the 4th book in the Stay a Spell series. This is Livy and Gareth. This is a very exciting book because we finally got to see what a Grimm can do. And we got so much more information, but at the same time, there's still so many questions about Grimms and how each Grimm is different. And this one I feel like is a little more of a darker twist. To her other books, it's a little more of a overt kinkier book. Compared to her other ones, but I thought it was great fun. I gave it 5 stars. It's not my favorite in the series because, it's really hard to pick a favorite in this series, but at this point, it's not my favorite because there's 2 others that are just phenomenal in my eyes. But if you haven't tried Juliet Cross, she's one of my favorite authors. This series is so wonderful. It's kind of think rom-com contemporary mixed with paranormal. Is super fun, and I'm sad because the final book comes out in May, and I'm like excited to get to the last book to see what happens with Clara and Henry, but at the same time I don't want it to be over. But I also know that Juliet has some fun things planned after she gets through the series, so it's just like I don't know what I want. But 5 stars. I'm not surprised. And that was June's favorite paranormal book. Now, moving on into July, we have another bonus book because I didn't read any paranormal in July once again. And I gave this to The Captive Merman's Promise. I read this for the Love in the Night read-along. And this is actually the group book that was chosen for that. And this is by Zoe Castile. Now, I had only read her contemporaries before, but this is what I didn't realize when I picked it up, but this is a gender-bent Little Mermaid retelling, but instead of our non-mer character being just a human, they are a Bruja witch, and this is Amada and Ronan, and I thought it was super fun. I gave it 4 stars. I was a little confused on some things, and I wanted some kind of clarification on some of the magic, and I didn't quite exactly understand how they were going to be together at the end, so I didn't quite 100% see the HEA, but I enjoyed my time with it. It was a perfectly fine book, and I'm definitely intrigued to read more paranormal from Zoe Castile. But yeah, so 4 stars, and it was a lot of fun. Then in August, I read my first Gina Showalter book, finally, and I picked up Lord of the Vampires. This is the first book in the Royal House of Shadows quartet, and these are 4 books kind of set around the same family that were released by Harlequin, their Nocturne label, and all 4 books are written by different authors. So the second book is Jill Monroe, the third book is Jessica Anderson, and the 4th book is Nalini Singh, which is what really intrigued me by this series, is we had Gina Showalter and Nalini Singh here. But yeah, so this was kind of interesting. I gave it 4 stars. This is Jane and Nikolai, and Jane is a human, and she's having funny dreams about Nikolai, a vampire in a different dimension, and somehow she ends up crossing dimension lines into the dimension where he lives, and she is taking the place of a princess, a very sadistic, evil princess, and she helps Nikolai escape from her clutches, and he is going through amnesia after his family was slaughtered and him and his brothers separated from each other. And so this is kind of the path for all of them to regain their family's name and move forward and get the big bad guy. So he is the eldest brother, and I think technically now the rightful ruler, because I think his parents have moved on, have passed. But yeah, so I gave it 4 stars. There was a little too much back and forth in situations where like we take 10 steps forward and then 5 steps back, and I felt like that a couple of times. So the pacing kind of fell off, and the plot wasn't quite as tight as I would come to expect. And maybe I was expecting a little bit more, because I know Gina Showalter is a favorite author of a lot of people, and my sister's a big fan of her as well. So it just wasn't quite what I was expecting, but at the same time I didn't know quite what I was expecting, and it wasn't quite what this book is. But I definitely want to read more of her standalone stuff, where it's standalone as in it's only her that's working on it instead of multi-authors, because maybe that could be she wasn't allowed to go her full what she wanted to do with it because she still had to connect it to the other books in the series or something. But I definitely need to read more of Gina Showalter and see what I think of her other books. Okay, so moving on to September, we have another bonus book that I have taking the place, and this is The Wallflower by Dana Marie Bell. This is the first book in her Hallie Puma series, and this is Emma and Max. Emma is a human, Max is a cougar shifter, and he is back in town to kind of take over as alpha of his group. I think they call them clans in this book. I can never remember what the cougar shifters are called. But he sees Emma, and they had gone to high school together, but she was a couple grades under him, and he recognizes her as his fated mate. We kind of get a surprise / forced turning into a shifter by him, but I was just rolling with it because they were kind of necking a little bit on the side of the road, and he couldn't help himself, and he bit her and turned her into a cougar because he wanted her as his mate, and he couldn't stop himself. And yeah, I mean, I gave it 4 stars. It was great fun, and I'm definitely intrigued. It had been a while since I read Dana Marie Bell, but I found this as an audiobook on my Hoopla, and so I picked it up, and I had a lot of fun with it. And then October, we have another Juliet Krauss book. This is book 5 in Stay a Spell. And this is the highly anticipated, long-awaited Jules and Ruben book. This is probably tied as one of my favorites in the book, and that's saying a lot because this is a second chance romance. But Jules and Ruben just were everything to me. There's a masquerade ball in here. I love the way the vampires work in this series, and Ruben is, I love Ruben, and it was amazing, and this cover is gorgeous, and it was everything I could have wanted and more. And I know that Juliet herself isn't the biggest fan of second chance romances, so I trusted going in that she would make it make sense to her on why they didn't work or weren't together in the beginning, and it completely worked for me. I didn't have any issues with the second chance part at all. So 5 amazing stars. Then for November, I ended up giving this to a fanfic I read for the fanfiction readathon, and that is for The Footprints Left by Willow9124. I give this 4.5 stars, and this is a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan fiction that is set shortly after the events of the series conclusion TV-wise of Angel and Buffy and Xander coming back to America after the apocalypse that Angel inadvertently started with Wolfram and Hart, and getting to who they're hoping are survived. And at this point, Buffy doesn't know that Spike's alive, and this, you can tell that the writer was a huge fan of the series, and they even made nods to situations that happened during the first season. I think that was of the comic books, because those kind of ran concurrently with what season 5 of Angel was. And I mean, the characters felt how they were, but there was also some kind of loose threads and some things kind of cleaned up in a really nice way of situations that were kind of left open at the end of the TV series itself, that I know some of them were dealt with in the comics as far as I read, but I don't know, it just felt so cozy and nice, and it had a different vibe, but all the characters felt the same. The only reason I didn't give it 5 stars is because I actually wanted more from Buffy and the Spike in their reunion, but what we did get was just so reminiscent of the scene at the end of the Buffy TV series where they have that last night in that random house, and he's there and he just tells her how amazing he is, and I'm tearing up just thinking about that scene because the way he tells her he loves her and he loves what she is and who she is, and Spike is swoony as all get out. Spuffy is my OTP for sure, but this had those vibes, but without the tension of this could be the end of us and the end of our existence and the end of the world, which there still was apocalypse stuff, but it didn't feel as heavy as that situation, but it was still swoony in the same kind of way, if that makes sense. But I adored this. 2 pieces, 4.5 stars. And then in December, I picked up Craved by Her Cougar by Felicity Heaton. This is the final book in her Cougar Creek Mates series. Now, I had read the first 2 of this series back in like 2018 or something, a long time ago. And then I saw that the audios were available on my Hoopla. So I finally finished the series, and I really enjoyed Craved by Her Cougar. And I gave this... I didn't actually write it down on my thing. I don't know how much I gave it. I know I gave it over 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. Every time I wanted something to happen, it blew me away, because I'd be like, I don't know, this could go down a path that I don't really like. And then the characters or the side characters would point out that they're doing something silly, or they're letting something get out of hand, and no, you need to go talk to your person who's your mate. And it didn't happen. Constantly, it didn't happen. And they were getting smacked in the butt by the truth, by the other people around them. And I was such a big fan of this. And this is Ember and Cobalt. It was a great finish to the end of the series. And yeah, I highly recommend Felicity Heaton. They definitely have more of an older paranormal vibe, like early 2010s, early to mid 2010s vibes, for sure. But, I mean, the first book and the 4th book were my favorite in the series, so take that for what it's worth. Okay, so now we have the 4 bonus books that I have. So for number 1, I had to give it to Buck Me for Christmas because it was just a wild ride. This is the first book in the Frost Brothers Brides series. This is also a part of her larger Shifter Grove universe by Anya Nolan. But this is Riley and Blitz, aka Blitzen. Now, I did give this one 3.5 stars, but more because there was some things that made me angry, but this is as someone who lives in Colorado and who has to drive in snow, and safety precautions that during snow. And what really drove this down for me is the whole situation in the beginning of the book. The heroine, Riley, is from, I want to say, Louisiana or somewhere down south, and constantly is making remarks about how she doesn't feel comfortable driving in the snow, and she's not comfortable driving in the snow, and she's not comfortable doing this, and she's really nervous about doing this, and she's in a rental car. And I'm like, if you're not comfortable, don't go up into the mountains where you don't know where you're going. Your GPS doesn't work. There's zero visibility. It's a blizzard. it's just silly decisions. And when you're talking about how you don't feel comfortable, don't put yourself in that situation. And the way that they meet is she ends up driving off a ravine onto a frozen lake, and the Jeep that she rented is sinking. And Blitzen is running through the woods trying to expel some steam. And I think the universe was kind of making him feel antsy because the universe was like, hey, your mate's nearby and she's trying to kill herself. Unintentionally trying to kill herself, and so he ends up saving her. And fated mate, super quick. Like I said, I give this 3.5 stars, but most of that was just because of my anger at her for the beginning situation. Like, there could have been a way for them to still meet, and for her to still get trapped in the blizzard, in the car, in the mountains somehow, but still making the smart decisions, if that makes sense. Like, she could have, made different decisions, stopped because she was feeling uncomfortable, and been sitting in the car and putting on her flashers or trying to do emergency maneuvers or something like that. Like, she could have made different and more logical or safer decisions in the situation, but still end up having something happen. But I just didn't like that she was making such obviously stupid and silly decisions. So yeah. But if you're from an area where things like that don't bother you, or you don't really know much about driving in the snow and real life decisions that you have to make in that situation, then maybe it won't bother you. Then for bonus book number 2, we have Burn by Suzanne Wright. Now the rest of these are lower rated, which is why they ended up being bonus books, but I was running out of paranormals to pick for the bracket. So this one I gave 3 stars. This is the first book I read by Suzanne Wright. This is the first book in her Dark and You series, which is an urban fantasy series set about demons. It was okay. I had some issues with the way the world was built and the plot, how that was running, and there were things trying to be kept hidden that didn't really need to be kept hidden, and then the things that would have made more sense to be kept hidden plot wise for us to learn were just kind of willy-nilly shared, and I don't know, it just didn't work for me. But it was fine, and it was a decent urban fantasy, but I gave it 3 stars. 3 stars for me, you're just like, it was okay. So there's that. For Courted by Her Cougar, this is the 3rd book in the Cougar Creek Mates series. I give this one 3 stars as well. It was fine. This is Yasmin and Flint, and Yasmin, for how smart that she's supposed to be, the fact that she's a demigoddess, and she just was making silly decisions, and she was goading people on who weren't Flint in the clan, and then situations would start happening, and then she would ask, oh, what did I say, or what was the meaning behind what they were saying to me about how they were officially wanting to court me, and what types of situations have I now put myself in. Like, you should have asked for that information before you agreed to it, kind of a thing. So it was fine. And I'm going to put this in here because it does lead up to book 4, and book 4 was awesome. And then the final bonus book I put in here, I really wanted to throw in here because it was a different kind of book. And that is Walking in Fire by Catherine Cade. This is the first book in her Hawaiian Heroes series. And this is Melia and Malu. And I was very, very excited to try this book based off the blurb. It sounded like he was kind of tasked or chosen, his family line was chosen by a god to be a guardian of this place. And when Melia is there on vacation and they run into each other, it was going to be like a fated mates kind of situation, but this is very, very light paranormal. There wasn't really anything paranormal here. There wasn't really anything paranormal about Malu outside of the fact that when he begged and he was almost dying, the god that I can't even remember, and my this picture downloaded all blurry, so I can't read what my blurb says, but the god that he worships or works for, it is a Hawaiian god. It kind of opens the ground and saves both him and Melia. And I was expecting more paranormal. I was expecting for him to kind of be granted powers or magical abilities or something along that line from the god. And somehow it was a romantic suspense and we were dealing with drug runners, which was not talked about in the blurb at all. And I was just like, what is happening here? This is nothing like the blurb. And I know that can happen, but it didn't live up to what I wanted paranormal wise. And then the romantic suspense parts of it weren't expected. And it was a really interesting turn because I didn't expect it to go romantic suspense wise from the first third of the book. So I gave it 3 stars, but I wanted to at least mention it because we have a Hawaiian hero and it was set in Hawaii. So yeah. So there are the 16 books that are going to be on the bracket. And then I did also want to kind of mention 3 honorable mentions here. So I have Heated Holiday by Mandy M. Roth. This is the 2nd book in her Bureau of Paranormal Investigation series. Now, I had read the 1st book in this series. Oh my gosh. I put Hunted Holiday. This is supposed to be Heated Holiday. I put the wrong one. This is book 1, not book 2. I put the wrong cover there. But I had read this book, Hunted Holiday, a couple years ago and gave it 4 stars. And then I saw that the first 2 books were available as audiobooks on Hoopla at Christmas time. So I picked up both the audiobooks. However, upon reread, I actually ended up moving it down to 3 stars. But I wanted to originally mention Heated Holiday, the 2nd book in this series. And this was kind of interesting. I also gave it 3 stars, but it could be the audiobook production is maybe what dropped it down. It's hard to tell with me reading it several years ago. And it could just be taste change as well. But yeah, so they are in this world, supernaturals are out, and the heroine secretly has magic, and she is the stepdaughter of basically the human guy that's behind the anti-supernatural movement. And she finds out that he's planning on bombing a building where they're going to have peace talks. And she ends up saving them. And she finds out that Cambridge, who's one of the vampire leader dudes, is her fated mate. And so he ends up rescuing her. And yeah, so I give it 3 stars, but I feel like that could be down because of the audiobook production, like I said. It wouldn't surprise me if it was 3.5 or 4 stars if I read it physically, but I wanted to mention that one. And then I also tried My Lonely Shifter Match by Sky Elder. This is a mashup or writing duo that writes under Sky Elder. And this is the first book in their Love Bites dating agency. Now, this does spin off of a different series. I didn't really need to know it, but there are kind of obvious nods to other characters from a different series of theirs. But I gave this one 3 stars as well. I mean, it was a cute, quick, fated mate situation. What I didn't like is the heroine was making some really silly choices. And then I didn't really quite understand the way that there was a big bad in this series. It just didn't need it for how short this book was. And then it didn't really kind of make sense, and it felt unnecessary as the big conflict at the end. And it's external conflict for the couple, but it just felt weird to me. And then I just kind of wanted to throw out Riding the Headless Horseman by Molly Likovich. I gave this 2.5 stars. I wasn't a big fan of it, but if you're looking for a smutty Halloween monster novella next year, I just kind of wanted to throw it out there. It was on KU. I had some issues with the Headless Horseman, and he was kind of kinky with her and a little controlling and domineering, and to me it didn't feel natural and it felt kind of weird. And then she was making some weird choices. But if you're looking for these kind of books and you enjoy these kind of books, I wanted to throw it out there because it's a different kind of monster than I've read before. I haven't seen very many Headless Horseman romances, so there you go. Those are my 3 honorable mentions. All right. So there we have it. There is the 16 books in the 3 honorable mentions that are on my bracket. So we will close that, and I have Canva all pulled up here. So once again, here's the blank bracket, but I have already gotten round 1 added to it. So let's just kind of jump right in to fill out the bracket. So I will zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so option 1, or round 1, I guess, battle 1, Nice Werewolves Don't Bite Vampires by Molly Harper versus Resting Witch Face. This is a very easy choice for me. I loved it. And you're going to fight me on centering, aren't you? I hate it when it does this. Let me zoom in a little bit more because then I can make more minute changes. Cool, that works good. Okay, then The Tyrant Alpha's Rejected Mate versus Craved by Her Cougar. I'm going to give it to Kate C. Wells. I'm going to do Rejected Mate. I definitely enjoyed it a lot more. Okay, then Darkest Night versus Burn by Suzanne Wright. This is easy for me. Okay, so I will get... that looks close. Oh, that jerked one more over. Okay, there's that. Then Walking in Fire versus The Captive Merman's Promise. I'm going to give it to Captive Merman. I enjoyed more of this story for sure. Okay. This one's not too bad since I had so many like 3-star and 3.5-star bonus books. This is going a little bit quicker than I expected. So then we have The Wallflower versus The Warrior's Regret. I think I'm going to give it to The Warrior's Regret. I was pleasantly surprised. And then The Footprints Left versus No Rest for the Wicked. Now, I loved The Footprints Left, but I put it there, but I was expecting it was going to probably be kicked out pretty soon because because it was a smaller fan fiction. So I'm going to give it to Cressley Cole because we get more out of it, but Footprints Left was amazing if you love Buffy, for sure. Buck Me for Christmas versus Always Practice Safe Hex. Gotta give it to Juliet for sure on this one. Why are there only 2 options? Zoom in a little bit more and see if you'll find me a little less. Okay, perfect. Okay, and then our final battle, Courted by Her Cougar and Lord of the Vampires. I'm going to give it to Lord of the Vampires. I know it's higher rated, and I definitely enjoyed it more than Courted by Her Cougar. Okay, well, that was... See, we talked about all the books first, and I definitely got through it a lot quicker this round. So I will zoom out a little bit more. So there we go. Round 1 is done. So there we go. On to our quarterfinals round. So we will zoom back in. Okay. Resting Witch Face versus Rejected Mate. This is a tough one. This is a tough quarterfinal for sure. Or no. Next round is quarterfinals. I gotta give it to Resting Witch Face. Which makes me sad that Rejected Mate is getting booted out so early, but Resting Witch Face was just so good. So good this year. Okay, And then we will move over here. Darkest Night versus the Captain Merman's Promise. Two very similar covers. That's crazy. I'm going to pop this up a little higher. Okay, and I'm going to give it to Darkest Night. This series is just everything I could want it to be. Okay, move down over here. Okay, so Warrior's Regret versus No Rest for the Wicked. I gotta give it to Cressley Cole, Catter in the Cold, and Sebastian Roth. I definitely need to pick back up in this series for sure. And then our final one is Always Practice Safe Hex versus Lord of the Vampires. And I'm going to give it to Always Practice Safe Hex for sure. Okay. Alrighty, so there we are. Round 2 is done. So that is what we're looking at. So now, or no, those were quarterfinals. So now we're on semifinals. So we will zoom in once again and move on. So Resting Witch Face versus No Rest for the Wicked. I'm going to give it to Resting Witch Face for sure. And here we can get a little bit bigger because I did make these slightly larger. Okay, and then Darkest Night versus Always Practice Safe Hex. I'm going to give it to Darkest Night. All right, and then we'll make it a little bit bigger here. All right. So there we go. Semifinals are done. So on to our final round. Resting Witch Face versus Darkest Night. Oh my gosh. Here's the hardest round for sure. For sure. Oh, two of my favorite authors. Two of the books that just made me swoon and feel all cozy inside. Oh gosh. This is such a hard choice. Okay, I just gotta do it. I just have to do it. So I am leaning towards one book and my heart is breaking because I don't want to let that other author down. But I gotta give it to Darkest Night. Am I regretting my choice already? No, I'm not. It's Darkest Night. It has to be. Okay. My heart breaks for Resting Witch Face, but Darkest Night just it took me completely by surprise. I was expecting to like it, but there was just something extra about it that just, like I said, it just felt so cozy, even though it was it's a dark paranormal adventure-y. I don't know. It took me by surprise. Even though I knew going in that I would enjoy it because I enjoy Alessa Thorne, it just took me to a place I wasn't quite expecting to go, and it is definitely my favorite book that I have read of Alessa Thorne so far, and I have read quite a chunk of her backlist, but there we go. My favorite paranormal romance of 2022. I feel so bad for Juliet because she's one of my favorite authors. I have all of her books in paperback and oh my gosh, it hurts me a little bit that Resting Witch Face isn't on there, but I have to pick one. I do it to myself, I know, but I just had to pick one and it had to be Darkest Night. So there we go. That's my favorite paranormal romance of 2022. There you have it. My favorite paranormal romance of 2022. I feel good about Alessa Thorne winning. I am obsessed with that series for sure. But at least the main 12 books that I chose, the one for each of the months, I definitely recommend. And if any of the bonus or honorable mentions sound intriguing to you, definitely check those out as well. But yeah, if you read paranormal romance or you're super interested in paranormal romance, definitely let me know what your favorite was down below, or if you're interested in any of these. If you would like to leave me an emoji down below instead, leave me something, knife or like sword or something related like that to go with the cover for the Alyssa Thorne book. But yeah, next week we have our final bracket for sci-fi, and I will just kind of warn you now, I had to do some finagling to make it work. So there's not going to be a full 16 seed plus 3 honorable mentions, but you will see that in next week's video. If you haven't, I had the playlist for all of the other ones linked up above at the beginning of this video, but I'm sure it's popped up in the sidebar or somewhere. But yeah, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you soon with another video.